So, if you ever browse through a storytelling manual or watch a couple of videos, you probably encounter the notion that the most important element in a story is conflict, that you cannot have a story without conflict. Or, to say it in another way, that in order to have a story, you need at least three elements. You need a character, you need obstacles, and you need a goal. So that your story is going to be the story of how your character reach his or her goal, overcoming the obstacles on their way. Now, intuitively, it's very easy to see why conflict is so important in a story, because the moment you have conflict in your story, the sequence of events bifurcates. You can see into the future through potential endings. The story can end well or badly. So your character can either achieve their goal or fail to do so. And this creates tension, because people want to see how the story is going to go. But let's stop there for a second. Because first of all, why do we want to see how the story is going to go? What is it about it? Why are we even interested? And even more, it's not actually true. I mean, we are sitting in the movie theater and we are watching the opening of Riders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones is standing in front of the idol in a temple ridden with traps. Now, we know that Indiana Jones is not gonna die trying to get the idol because it's the beginning of the movie and it's a movie about Indiana Jones. And yet we enjoy that sequence. Even if we know how it's going to end, we still want to see it. Even if years later we find the same scene on YouTube in a YouTube short, we're still gonna watch it and enjoy it. We can be on Instagram and find a video of a cat sitting on a desk with a cup in front of it. And we know that a cat is gonna trip the cup down, but still we want to see it happen. Why is that? What is it about this little sequence of events that captures us so much? Why are we interested in that? Why do we have an emotional response to those things? Which is a question connected to a broader question, which is why do we even care about stories in the first place? We rarely stop and ask ourselves, yes, but why? Why do we care about this? Why is this important to us? Of course, you probably heard one of the most common answers, which is like, well, stories help us make sense of the world around us. And that's definitely true of some stories. The Bible or the Quran are collections of great stories that help a lot of people make sense of their own experience as human beings. Other people, without trying to be blasphemous, find the same pleasure, the same meaning in Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Star Wars. But what about Mission Impossible or James Bond or Indiana Jones? Do people watch Mission Impossible because they find meaning in Mission Impossible? Seems very unlikely. And then if you ask this to people, they say, well, no, it's not that you find meaning in Mission Impossible, but it's funny. It's a funny movie. But what is funny about it? Now, the answer to this question, one potential answer to this question, has to do with music. And it's an answer that can bring us a deeper understanding of the real role of conflict in storytelling and of the real power of storytelling. So let me explain what I mean. First of all, music is quite an incredible thing when you think about it. First of all, it's a human universal, meaning that wherever you find humans, you find music, you also find stories. Of course, what kind of music, it's culturally defined. Different cultures enjoy different kinds of music, but there's always going to be music. And music has some incredible effects on us. It can excite us or calm us down. It can make us happy or sad. It's very easy to remember. We can be at Starbucks ordering an espresso or whatever, and there's a tune in the background. We're not paying attention. We're doing our thing. We're ordering our coffee and discussing. Then we go home and we're taking a shower and we find ourselves humming that same tune. And we're like, what is this? Where did I hear this song? Oh, what's the goddamn song at Starbucks? It got stuck into my head. That's a pretty crazy sentence to say. It got stuck into my head. Even more, if I was to start singing a song that you haven't heard in 20 years, chances are you would recognize it almost immediately. Go, oh, I know that song. Chances are you would even be able to hum along. A song that you haven't heard in 20 years. And that is not true of just one song. Chances also are that in your brain there's an archive of dozens, if not hundreds of songs. Recent studies have shown that music excites in our brain some very ancient structures. Those ancient centers that are responsible for rewarding us when we engage in activities connected with our survival, like escaping a predator or any form of danger, or find another food source. Scientists are not entirely sure of why this is happening, but there is one theory that is very popular and seems like a very good candidate to be the right theory. It's from 1956 from a guy called Mayer, who suggested that maybe the special relationship that we have with music could have something to do with pattern recognition, which is our ability to recognize order in the world around us, structure in the world around us. Imagine this, if me and you were walking down the street, for example, and we're talking, we are soaked in noise. There's traffic, other people talking, music, there's a television running. And yet, as we keep walking and talking, we are perfectly able, without thinking about it, to focus on each other's words and eliminate everything else. But at the same time, our brain is actually keeping an eye, so to speak, in what's happening around us, as proven by the fact that if you hear some specific noises, like somebody screaming, tires screeching, or a loud bang, then you pay attention. Your brain signals you, look out, because something is about to happen. And then we turn. 5 minutes ago, we were monkeys sitting in a jungle, eating a mango, for example, and that ability, the ability to recognize structures, to hear that, wait a second, the way the leaves behind me are rustling is different from before. Let me turn so I can see the panther sneaking toward me. That ability was really important for us to survive. So you would see why our brain rewards us when we are able to recognize structures. If we are standing in front of a tree and thinking like, well, the structure of this tree, the way the branches are composed, I kind of seen this before. Let me climb this tree. And then we find bananas. Oh, these footprints, I don't like these footprints at all. They look dangerous. They look like they belong to something that I should probably avoid. Let me move the other way. We would see why our brain would reward us for the ability to recognize the structures. And music, it's made of structures, it's made of patterns. If you think about the instruments we have built throughout our history to make music, they're not so much tools to make sound. They are tools to modify sounds, guitars, violins, drums, because music is not a property of a single sound. No sound is musical in itself. Music is a property of a sequence of sounds. If a sequence of sounds don't change enough, we perceive static and we don't pay attention, like the humming of the fridge. If a sequence of sounds changes too erratically, we perceive noise, and again, we don't pay attention. But when a sequence of sounds changes, building patterns, following some sort of rule, then we get hooked. Then we're like, oh, something is happening here, and we pay attention. And all those magical things I was talking about before start happening. We can remember them, we get excited, we have an emotional response. Because our brain recognizes these are patterns. We should try to predict where they go. We should try to memorize them. This could be important. And so he incentivizes us to do this by rewarding us with dopamine. Simultaneously, our brain also excites us when we fail to recognize patterns, because that's equally important. If you go on Instagram, there are a few videos about people performing magic tricks for monkeys at a zoo. In one of the videos, there's a guy who puts a ball in a cup and then makes it disappear. As he's preparing the magic trick, putting the ball into the cup, the monkey is not paying much attention. It's actually ostensibly showing that, oh, I'm not interested in this. I've seen people putting balls in cups before. But then the guy ends the trick and shows the empty cup, and the monkey goes crazy. She throws her arms in the air, she starts screaming with clear excitement, because she was anticipating the end of that pattern. She saw a sequence of actions and she was able to predict where the sequence of actions would end. And when she failed to do so, she was soaked in excitement. If you have ever performed a magic trick for a kid, you've seen a similar kind of reaction. Kids go crazy when you do something like that. They shake you like, ah, they scream, and then they go like, do it again, show me it again, do it again. They want to see it again. That reaction has something aggressive to it. It almost looks like fear, right? Like screaming, getting incredibly tense, grabbing you. Because, once again, their brain is something really deep inside of them is signaling them, this is important. We have failed on something really important. We need to pay attention. It's the same mechanism that you would have with humor. If you think about what humor is really creating a setup, a set of circumstances that seem to lead to an inevitable conclusion, and then taking a sharp turn. Easy or cake, happy birthday, and then I squash it on your face, and we laugh. We laugh, which is one of those activities in which we make ourselves bigger, we make loud noises, and we show our teeth. And if you ask any sociologist or anthropologist, what that means, they will tell you, well, that's kind of a sign of aggression. Yeah, it's excitement for us. That's how we interpret it. And it's actually a leftover of a different time in which there was a completely different reaction with a completely different meaning. So we have reactions, emotional reactions, that we recognize the pattern or do we fail to do so. Now, if we go back to storytelling, we go back to the beginning of Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones is standing in front of the idol in a temple ridden with traps, something that we know. So Indiana Jones, being a smart guy, swapped the idol for a bag full of sands, and the traps are not activated. Only they are. So now he needs to run because there's a giant rock rolling toward him. But he's managing to escape it. Only not. The rock is getting closer, but he jumps aside, and the rocks crash against the wall. So now he's running again, but now there are arrows coming from all directions. But he's gonna make it. But the guy he's with is gonna betray him, so he's not going to make it. As we watched this sequence of events unfolding in front of us, our brain registered and said, wait a second, this is not random. There is order here. There is something connecting these events that gave them sense. This is a sequence. They are connected to one another. This is a pattern. I should pay attention here. And so it heightened our attention and our focusing on the sequence. What is keeping those events together is conflict. Because the moment that we see Indiana Jones in front of the idol in a temple ridden with traps, main character, goal, and obstacles, we understand what it's about to happen. He's gonna grab the idol, but then the traps are gonna get activated. So now we have two potential outcomes. Either Indiana Jones is gonna escape or he's gonna die trying to do so. It doesn't really matter that one of the two outcomes is completely unlikely to happen. What matters is the fact that once we have those two outcomes, we have created a reference system. Every new event in the sequence introduces a difference, moving us toward one ending or the other, that we can evaluate without the need to think about it. We can register the fact, oh, all of these events are all connected along this reference system. And so we can start hear the music, seeing the pattern, and then we pay attention. If you think about the experience of sitting in a cafe, for example, and overhearing a song that you haven't heard in a while that you like, there's a sense of excitement, right? Oh, listen to this song, it's beautiful. You see, now it's the verse, now the break, hear the chorus. And when actually the song goes where we remember it would go, we have, once again, dopamine. We feel good. It's the same experience of encountering a scene or a sequence of a movie we love on YouTube. We're like, I want to see this. And when the sequence goes when we expected it to go, once again, we feel well. So there's a very good chance that the same mechanism that is at play in music, the fact that we recognize pattern, is at play in storytelling, with the main difference that in order for a sequence of events to be perceived by us as forming a pattern, the events need to be connected along one dimension, and that dimension is defined by conflict, by the opposition between a bad ending and a good ending, which is, to say it in another way, a moral space. Conflict creates a moral space that is behind the story, which allows us to hear the music of the story. Now, it's a locally defined moral space, of course. It's defined by the point of view that we assume as we tell the story. So if it's Indiana Jones' story, Indiana Jones getting the idol is positive. Indiana Jones failing to do so is negative. We could 100% imagine a story in which you reverse this polarity, you choose another character, and Indiana Jones snatching the idols is absolutely the bad outcome of the story. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you need a moral space. That moral space is always behind every story. Even the cat on the desk with the cup, even there's a moral space. Without that, we cannot hear the music. The extraordinary aspect about all of this, in my opinion, is that this works even when we are not aware of what's actually going on. As I said before, these centers in our brain are very ancient. They act before our conscious mind is involved. Reason why we can react to stories on an emotional level even when we don't really understand what is the conflict at play. Which might sound ludicrous when you say it like this. But I'm sure that you're familiar, if once again you ever browse a storytelling manual, with the idea that there are different levels of conflict. The classical position is between external conflict and internal conflict. External conflict is Indiana Jones versus the Nazis, is conflict that happens outside of the character. Internal conflict is Frodo versus the corruptive power of the ring, is happening inside of the character. There's a subset of stories in which the external conflict is just a reflection of the internal conflict. It's an echo, okay? You create a structure in which the internal conflict gives sense to everything around it. An example of this is Titanic. And Titanic is an example that I love to use. I've been teaching storytelling for 15 years and I always use Titanic. And the reason I do it is because my students normally look at me like, Titanic? A sugary piece of crap? You see, they are artists, they are storytellers, writers, screenwriters. They want to be Dostoevsky or Hemingway. They don't want to write Titanic. And so I asked them, well, since Titanic is so below you, you surely can tell me what the story of Titanic is about. And then somebody would say, well, it's the story of a ship sinking. And I would say, well, if it's a story of a ship sinking, how come there's no iceberg until halfway through the movie? What is the audience looking at for 1 hour and a half? And somebody else stand up and say, well, it's not a story of a ship sinking, it's a love story. Fair enough, it's a love story. But how come that the love story ends with Jack turning into a popsicle and sinking to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean? Doesn't look like a happy ending to me. And in 15 years that I've been doing this, a handful of people, just a handful, like less than 5%, I would say, were actually able to tell me, no, it's not a love story, and it's not the story of a ship sinking. It's the story of Rose's liberation, which is the correct answer. Not because the other 95% of people were idiots, just because they didn't spend much time thinking about it. They watched the movie, some of them even liked the movie, but they felt like there was nothing to it. But actually, Titanic is absolutely the story of Rose's liberation. Even more, the conflict that is happening inside of Rose is what gives sense to every aspect of the movie. When the movie begins, Rose is about to kill herself, throwing herself in the black water at night from the back of the ship because she's living a life that she doesn't feel is her own. She feels trapped. And she meets Jack, which is the polar opposite. Jack is completely free. He's also completely broke, but he's completely free. He does whatever he wants. And as they fall in love, she learns how to be free by interacting with Jack. And while she's learning how to be free and how to let all of these things go, they move from the back of the ship to the front of the ship, from the night to the day, from the first class to the third class. That conflict that is inside of Rose not only gives sense to the events of the story, but to every single element of the story. Every location, the time of the day, the characters, the iceberg, everything is connected to her internal conflict. Her internal conflict is what creates the reference system that I was talking about before, the moral opposition that allow the audience to hear the music. And yet, 95% of them, at least the sample that I have with my writing classes, fail to recognize what the conflict is. Their conscious mind is not aware of what's going on. But their subconscious completely understand what's going on. I saw Titanic in the movie theater, and I remember there's a scene in which Jack teaches Rose how to spit. Eventually, she's very resistant to do that, but then eventually she spit like a lady, like, and it's like, no, you need to dig deep. And she does it. And the entire room went like, oh. They made that sound because they understood what was really happening. And what was really happening was that Jack was teaching Rose how to be free. And yet, if I had interviewed them outside the movie theater, they would have failed to say that. They would have said, no, the movie is about a ship sinking, or the movie is about a love story. It's incredible. It's incredible because they are able to hear the music of that story. They instinctively understand what the story is about, otherwise they wouldn't engage. They wouldn't feel like every single moment of that story is relevant. But their conscious brain doesn't get involved. It's also a little bit scary if you think about. But at the same time, once again, it's perfectly in line with what happened with music. I'm able to sing badly, Helped by the Beatles or a dozens of other songs. But if somebody was like, okay, can you write down, the notation for Helped by the Beatles? I was like, no, I don't. Can you explain to me what is the progression of Helped by the Beatles? Like, no, I don't even know. But what? I'm not a musician. I don't understand music. I don't write music. When my musician friends talk to me about music, I'm always looking at them like, I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds cool. But I still can understand music and I can remember music without my conscious brain getting involved. The same happened with storytelling. This is also incidentally the reason why so many writers can tell you, oh, you don't need storytelling. All of this bullshit is different theories and techniques. I never read any of that. And look at me, I have a splendid career. Yeah, just like the Ramones were able to have a splendid career and create an whole new genre without knowing how to write or read music. but they still had inside of them an enormous archives of patterns, of music, of songs that they heard before. And so they were able to play by ear. It's like, okay, this is the progression of chords because I heard it so many times. What if instead of going here, I go there? What if I do this instead of that? What is going to happen? And when they found something that they like, they probably felt a sense of elation again. Oh, I created a new pattern that makes sense to me. And storytellers, good storytellers, they have the same thing. They have a gigantic archives of stories, of patterns in their brain. And what they're writing, like they write the beginning of a scene and then this happened. And they feel that tingling, like, ooh, this is so cool. They're just extracting the rules, extracting the principle from the stories they've heard before, from the patterns that they have internalized without realizing what they're doing. Which doesn't mean that learning this thing explicitly, talking about the role of conflict, talking about storytelling, talking about the different theories is useless. It can be extremely useful when you find yourself stuck, when you realize that you have flaws as a storyteller that you don't know how to confront. That's when these theories come useful. But it all originates from this idea that stories are important for a million reasons, for what they mean, because they can teach us how to be better human beings, because they can show us our flaws, because they can criticize the world around us. All of that is true. But before all of that, stories talk to something really ancient in us, which recognize order. In this case, the order of events, the pattern the events throw. But that pattern can only be recognized, can only be felt if there is conflict, if there's a clear opposition between good and evil, again, locally defined opposition between good and evil behind your story.